The Wiccan Wheel of the Year, ancient custom or modern contrivance. Let's explore the Wiccan Wheel of the Year and see whether there is historical basis for the festivals of the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. So let's start with Yule. Yule on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year on the winter solstice. While that, for a start, that dating of Yule is really the date post-Christianization, when Yule was moved to the winter solstice to be part of the Christian customs of Christmas. And so the pre-Christian Yule was actually the full moon of midwinter, after the winter solstice. However, Yule still is an ancient heathen festival, and so there is historical basis for it, and it was celebrated on winter solstice. Okay, that's the Christianized dating, but it is an ancient custom and was celebrated on the winter solstice historically. So yes, Yule is an ancient heathen festival, but the dating to the winter solstice comes during Christianization. So I'll move on to the next one of the dates on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, Imbolc, and that being February the 1st in the Northern Hemisphere, the start of spring. Imbolc does appear to be a historical Celtic festival. Imbolc is one of the 4 Celtic fire festivals, so it does have historical roots. Well, there's historical sources for it. It was written in the 9th century, so it does appear to be, an ancient Celtic festival. And one of the significant seasonal points of the year, first day of spring, and the name Imbolc meaning in the belly, referring to the pregnant animals at the time of spring. The next date on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, Ostara. And Ostara is on the spring equinox, March the 21st in the Northern Hemisphere. And I'm going to give the Northern Hemisphere dates here because that's where the calendar comes from. So Ostara takes place on the spring equinox. Ostara thought to originate from the Anglo-Saxon moon around the time of the spring equinox. That name of the moon is actually Ostara, and so it's thought that Ostara is coming from that name of the moon. Possibly Ostara is a Saxon goddess, and it's thought there were possibly feasts held around the time of that moon, and so maybe Ostara was an ancient Saxon feast. Eostre being the name of the moon around the time of the spring equinox and the Germanic goddess, and so celebrations probably would have taken place around the full moon, not on the spring equinox. And so the dating of a Ostara on the spring equinox as a festival, it's a bit questionable, this one. If it was a festival that was, this feast to Eostre, if that was a Saxon goddess, probably not on the spring equinox, but on the full moon likely. So the Wiccan Ostara on the spring equinox appears to be modern, from the 20th century. However, some possible historical roots there. And Eostre may possibly have been the pagan precursor to Easter. So let's move on to Beltane. So Beltane, May Day, May the 1st. Beltane was one of the 4 Celtic fire festivals, and it marked the beginning of summer according to the Celtic calendar, and that source is coming from Cormac Mac again. Now, James Fraser, the author of the Golden Burr, suggests Beltane and Samhain were the most important of the 4 Celtic fire festivals. So the beginning of summer and the beginning of winter, and this is the concept of the year as 2 halves and 2 seasons, the light and the dark halves of the year, and those points that marked the beginning of each of those halves being major points of the year, major seasonal points of the year. Cormac mentions that cattle were driven between bonfires as a protection ritual from illness before the cattle were taken to summer grazing fields. Source there for some of the ancient customs of Beltane. And also on Beltane it was a fire festival, so we're talking bonfires, feasting and ale and who knows, all kinds of freaky pagan shit going on Beltane. Well, all of the Celtic fire festivals perhaps. So yes, Beltane does appear to be an ancient pagan festival. However, how much of Beltane as it is today is really ancient custom? And with all these dates, I have to ask, how much is really ancient custom? What I'm doing here is really trying to find what is the ancient custom? What were they ancient custom? What is the historical basis for each of these dates? And a lot of probably what's observed today in neo-paganism is not really the ancient customs. Just to finish off Beltane, the folk tradition of the maypole dancing takes place around Beltane on May Day, right? Possibly originating from the poles and the trees of the pagan past, the Saxon custom of the god poles and the Irminsul pillar could possibly be a connection to the maypole dancing. So let's move on now to Litha. Litha being summer solstice on the Wiccan wheel of the year, June the 21st, Northern Hemisphere. Was Litha an ancient pagan festival? No. Litha appears to be a modern Wiccan holiday established in the 20th century by Gerald Gardner and his mates who created the Wiccan wheel of the year. However, there is some sort of historical basis for Litha, not as a festival on summer solstice, but as the name for the period of the middle of summer, and of the name of the moon of the middle of summer. So the name Litha comes from the name of the moon of the summertime from the Anglo-Saxon calendar. So Litha refers to the summertime, not to an ancient pagan festival. So Litha basically just means the period of midsummer. The two Litha moons of the ancient Saxon calendar of around the time of midsummer. The name Litha meaning to guide, from Old English, Old Norse lida, meaning to go. And so Litha or lida, it's meaning to go, to travel on the gentle seas and the gentle weather at that time of the year. That was the time of the year when folk would travel, go on the seas, trading, raiding. And so this is really what Litha means. It's the time of year, the calm seas, good time for travelling on the seas during the gentle Litha months, moons of summertime. So I want to move on to Lunasa now, the beginning of the harvest, August the 1st in the Northern Hemisphere, one of the 4 Celtic fire festivals. So it's seasonal festivals. So there is historical basis for Lunasa. So yes, Lunasa does appear to be an ancient pagan festival. And the festival is named after the god Lugh, the Celtic god of the sun and light, and hence the harvest. Evidence suggests that the religious rites, including an offering of the first fruits, a feast of the new food, a sacrifice of a bull, and ritual dance play. And these being the customs, the historical ancient customs of Lunasa. And the name Lunasa, an old Irish name meaning the god Lugh, and Lunasa meaning an assembly. And so it's a combination of those words, the gathering of the god Lugh for that festival. Mabon or Mabon, autumn equinox, September the 21st on the Wiccan wheel of the year. Mabon, the name originating from a Welsh god. Mabon appears to be a Wiccan invention from the 1970s with no historical basis. Not an ancient pagan festival, not one of the 4 Celtic fire festivals, a New Age or neo-pagan celebration of the 20th and 21st century. Okay, so the autumn equinox is an ancient custom, is an ancient observance, right? But the idea of calling it Mabon as an ancient festival, there's no basis for that. So Mabon is on the autumn equinox, and perhaps the equinoxes were times of festival by ancient peoples, but probably not the Celts or the Anglo-Saxons, and that's really what the Wiccan Wheel of the Year is based on, Celtic and Anglo-Saxon festivals and names, right? And holding a Mabon celebration on the autumn equinox does appear to be a modern invention by Gardner and his mates in the 20th century. Pretty much they created a calendar. They created the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. From the 1950s to the 70s, around that time, they wanted to include the 4 Celtic fire festivals, which are historical pagan festivals, and the solstices and equinoxes. And so they sort of just bring it all together in this calendar system. But they've attributed names to these festivals that are not necessarily ancient festivals. Okay, so I want to move on to the last of the eight festivals, 8 holidays, 8 dates of the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. Samhain, October the 31st. Samhain meaning end of summer in Gaelic, or the end of the harvest, and one of the Celtic fire festivals. And so yes, Samhain is indeed an ancient pagan festival. Thought to be the Celtic New Year, the historical Samhain would have probably taken place on the full moon at the end of summer, and so not on the 31st of October. And that's again because the Celts observed a lunar-based calendar system, and so their festivals would have taken place on the full moon, not on fixed calendar dates like the 31st of October. That dating of Samhain on the 31st of October is really coming from the Christian All Souls Day, All Hallows Eve, Halloween, right? The roots of Halloween. This year, at the time of recording, the full moon of October took place on the 28th of October. So very close, just a few days off the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. So it's close, it's around that time. Does Halloween really originate in Samhain? Well, Halloween is around the same time of the year as Samhain, not necessarily on the same date though. Halloween deriving from All Hallows evening and All Souls Day, the day after. And so it's a Christian tradition. However, the roots of All Hallows possibly derive from Samhain. And so there are possible, and that's thought to be possible roots of Halloween as well. Halloween on the 31st of October, Samhain on the 31st of October on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, All Hallows Eve on the 31st of October. And this is really where the datings come from. But the historical, ancient dating of Samhain, probably not. It's possible that the full moon some years could fall on the 31st of October, but it's a different date year to year. Okay, so the dates of the Wiccan Wheel of the Year really are solar-based dates and fixed calendar dates, but the Celts and the Anglo-Saxons had lunar-based calendar systems, and so the dating of pretty much all of these dates is not really ancient custom. The calendar system was developed out of a need, I guess, to return to the pagan past. It works for a lot of people to have fixed dates, to follow this calendar system, because it's the same dates every year, and so it's easy to follow, easy to understand. But what I'm doing in this content is exploring the historical roots and what is historical and what is modern. And with really all of these dates on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year, how much of it is really ancient custom? There's some sort of historical basis in a lot of them, but a lot of what's practiced today in Wicca and neo-paganism is really modern and not really ancient custom, which is fine. Which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just looking at what it is. So the Wiccan Wheel of the Year was created from the 1950s onward by Gerald Gardner and his mates. I guess it's inspired by ancient pagan festivals and customs, and I can see why it's been developed. The calendar itself is not an ancient calendar, not observed by any people, whether it's the Celts or the Anglo-Saxons, but it is using those dates, those four Celtic fire festivals, names from the Anglo-Saxon names for some of these datings. But when we look into it, not really historically accurate. That's the 8 dates of the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. There's the 4 Celtic fire festivals that do have some sort of historical do appear to be ancient pagan festivals. Then there's the solstices and equinoxes, which not so much. And it appears that they were just sort of put into this calendar system, just sort of forced into it. We're not really ancient custom. There's Yule, which is an ancient heathen festival, but the way it's observed in Wicca on the winter solstice and a lot of the customs around it, not really, it's kind of. And then there's Ostara, maybe not. Mabon and Litha, not. And so it's kind of yes and no. Is the Wiccan Wheel of the Year ancient custom or is it modern? And it's modern and ancient. It's both. The calendar system was really just kind of pieced together from a lot of different sources. There's not an ancient calendar system, was not observed historically, but dates on the calendar were. And I guess that's what I'm doing, is just exploring what is the historical basis? Is there a historical basis? What is ancient and what is modern? And just worth knowing. And that's my look at the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. Historical or modern? Historical and modern is what I'm concluding. And really more historical roots than I thought. When I started looking into this, I thought, oh, there'd be a few things here and there, but I kind of thought that it was created in the 20th century. But actually, there is quite a bit of historical basis for a lot of it. And a lot not as well. A bit hit and miss. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. That's my research on the Wiccan Wheel of the Year and my take on whether it's historical or modern. So like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next one.